What is a disc injury? Whether it's herniated disc, whether it's a slip disc, whether it's a bulging disc, what is it? What's happening down here in the lower back? How does it happen? And what, more importantly, can we do to actually resolve this? Because a lot of people, they get that diagnosis or they get that suspicion that there's a disc injury in the lower back and things start to fall apart. They get very, very despondent. It sounds like you can't necessarily do anything to deal with these things. And in this video, we're gonna make sure we steer you away from some of the bad things. And at the end of the video, we're gonna go through four steps in order that you can do to really effectively combat this injury and really resolve in a way in which you're able to get back to doing the things that you love on a daily basis. And that's really the important part or important point of this video. So first off, what is a disc and what is its role in your body? Now, we're going to talk about the lower lumbar spine discs, the L4-5, this disc here, and the L5-S1 disc here as well for the purposes of today's video, because those are the most common ones that are injured in the lower back in varying degrees, whether it's degenerative, herniated discs, as I mentioned, slip, bulging, whatever it is. What is the role of these discs? Well, they act as little spaces and little cushions to separate out the vertebral bodies. That gives them movement and mobility, and they work very closely with the facet joints of the back. And you can see that there is a connected structure. This vertebral unit has obviously the discs on the front and it has the facet joints on the back. So when we're thinking about disc injuries, it's really going to be a segmental injury, and it's going to have involvement with other structures and supporting ligaments, etc. in that region. And that's probably a very helpful way of you thinking about injuries in the lower back in general. Yes, they invariably involve the discs, as we've mentioned, but they are very much a segmental problem because we can't separate out these structures in the way in which they function. They're interrelated in a big, big way. Now, the way in which these discs get injured is through compression. It's load, and that can come under two different categories. Category number one is the rare one, and that is a extreme one-off load. Let's suppose you were using a piece of equipment, maybe you were an NHS nurse and you're using a hoist, and all of a sudden the hoist fails, and we get a rapid load of, maybe it's an overweight patient, and all of a sudden 100% of their body weight goes through your discs, and we get that extreme load onto these discs, and all of a sudden it fails. The second option, which is much, much, much more common, is that repetitive activities, sort of subacute, if we will, low grade activities, repetitive disuse or poor use of the lower back is what results in this. Small levels of strain that they build up over time, and then it's a relatively minor incident, such as putting on your socks in the morning, that causes them to go, or putting the child in the car seat that causes them to go. We have to remember one important thing about these discs. The important thing is these discs are incredibly strong. They're designed to take our whole body weight. They're designed, and you can see this on display, the Olympics, all sorts of activities that we do on a daily basis, that we put inordinate amounts of stress and strain through these discs, through leaping and bounding exercises when we're younger, when we're older, moving around, lifting weights, lifting heavy objects, putting load, someone on your back. These are very, very strong structures. And unfortunately, when people do have the second in the example, where it goes after a number of little occurrences, they go, oh my gosh, my disc, my back was so vulnerable. It went because I put the socks on. Your discs aren't that vulnerable. That wasn't the one event. And this is very important for the next part that we're going to talk about in this video. It was accumulation. The discs are very, very strong, but they have one weakness, and it's not in its structure, it's in the way in which they work. The problem with the discs is that you can abuse them and use them and strain them and create weaknesses in the structure that allow the nucleus, the gel in the middle, the bit that gets herniated, to start to break through some of those inner layers of the disc that hold it in place. If we think of it like a donut or a jam donut, we've got the dough and then we've got the jam in the middle, and you don't know, you don't feel that jam creeping through those damaged layers on the inside of that disc. You don't feel that, you're not aware of it. And that's where I'm talking about misuse. The poor use of the back, weakening those structures, so you don't know that it's happening. And then finally the last one goes, and then you feel it. And we think, well, it was just yesterday that happened. It was only this morning that I put the socks on. And it's such a small, insignificant activity, but it really has a big role in the way in which you as an individual perceive that disc injury. You say, my disc went because I did such a small thing, therefore my back is so very, very vulnerable. It's a glass back. It's very, very weak. And that's not the case. It's very, very strong. But you have been abusing it for a very, very long time when it goes under those circumstances. That's important. When it goes under those circumstances, those really seemingly innocuous activities that cause the back to go. So what symptoms happen when this injury does happen? Whether it's the strain that suddenly becomes symptomatic, whether it's when the jam does creep out of that donut and it's hit a nerve, or it's in the vicinity of a nerve creating a lot of inflammation that irritates the nerves. Well, we can get a number of symptoms. This is where people get confused, and within reason, matter too much what those symptoms are, because you could have one disc bulge at one level. We mentioned the L5S1 and the L45 earlier, and different people with that same disc bulge can have different injuries because of the nuances of that, and you don't have control physically of the nuances, so don't worry about those too much. But we can have minor lower backache. As we've mentioned earlier in this video, you can have damage building up in those discs and not know about it because it's not at a significant level or in the right place just yet. So that's one thing to bear in mind. No back pain. We could have only leg pain, and when we say leg, we could mean the glutes, part of the leg, if you will. We could the hip region. We could mean down in the actual leg itself, the thigh, the lower leg, the calf region, or into the foot. We could have symptoms there. We could also obviously have symptoms in the lower back and in the leg at the same time, or one or the other, and we could have them sometimes there, sometimes not. All of these symptoms can happen, and it's worth, because it's a disc injury video, touching on the emergency symptoms, and I'll do that very, very briefly because these are fortunately very rare, and that is the symptoms of cauda equina. That is when there is a significant emergency-worthy injury to the lower back, and we have what's called saddle anesthesia. We potentially have loss of bladder and bowel control as well, and saddle anesthesia means that you lose sensation in the area of your body that would be in contact with a saddle if you were to ride a horse, for example. So I'll let you guys, if you think that's you, I'd really hope you're not watching this video. You're already getting that dealt with, because that needs to be dealt with. But most of you, the overwhelming majority of you, if not all of you watching this video, are not under that category, thankfully. The one thing people really get caught up with symptoms is when they change. Oh, it's always been in my leg and now it's just in my back. Sometimes that's normal. In certain cases, that's a process called centralization. As your back recovers, the symptoms in the limb, sciatic symptoms, move back up towards the lower back, and then they go. And that's something you see in clinical practice as the patient resolves, as treatment starts to have an effect, or as rehabilitation starts to have an effect as well. So that brings us to the final and most important part of this video. And let's grab the spine again just to show you what we're talking about as we go through these 4 steps. Number 1, we want to remove the false or bad stressors. And unfortunately, this includes many exercises that are recommended in many cases with back pain in general. And that's because people don't, unfortunately, certain approaches, philosophical approaches to back pain, don't understand that in many cases the discs, in most cases if you will, the discs and the structures down here are involved. And that is to eliminate silly exercises like knee hugs, like cat-cow pose, extreme flexion forward bending activities, like the sciatic flossing, and we've got videos on that as well. Elimination of those extreme exercises in the early days. They're just not necessary and they're not really helping you go forward. Sure, they feel nice while you do them, and we've got other videos explaining why that is, and that's predominantly due to the way in which we change the size of the space here. That's all they're doing, not much else. But you need to remove those activities. We need to also consider the context. As we mentioned, most of you are going to be that second cause of the disc injury. It's going to be the repetitive strain, the poor use of your body. So we need to be mindful of that. Are you sitting at a desk for hours every day? We need to modify that if we can. We need to get a sit-standing desk. We need to take phone calls when we're walking around rather than staying sat down on the spot. We need to modify the way in which we're doing things on a daily basis. And this comes a little bit later on, learning again how to move correctly. And maybe that's not again, maybe that's learning for the first time, even if you're in your 50s, 60s or 70s. It might be the case you're learning for the first time how to move properly. Because a lot of people, we have bad habits that have built up over many years, habits that have taken advantage of this area, which is why that second cause of these disc injuries, the repetitive building, is so very common. The other thing is, when we think about back pain, we ignore it. Oh, it aches a bit, it goes away. It aches a bit, it goes away. That's that guy on the shoulder going, hey, I'm over here. You're working me too hard, not happy about it, yeah, go away, I'll deal with you another time. The thing with back pain and these sorts of injuries is you will have to deal with it, and it's better, much, much better that you deal with it on your terms rather than that tap on the shoulder becomes a stabbing pain in the back. It is much, much easier to deal with these things proactively than reactively. Please bear that in mind going forwards. Point number 2 is to evaluate the reality of that situation. Do you think you fall under the category of having a long history of bad habits? Did the back go, this incredibly strong, well-built, evolutionary structure? Did it go when you were putting your socks on this morning? Did it go during an activity that's equally silly in many respects? Well, if that is the case, evaluate the context of how long you may well have been making the situation worse, and that's going to give you a cue going forwards. If you think it was just that you put your socks on and that was what caused your back pain or the disc to bulge, then your expectation will be that it'll be gone in a few days and it'll be resolved and you'll be hunky-dory, and that will lead you to be disappointed that's not the case, and that doesn't happen. And that mentally up here can play real challenges in terms of making you very, very despondent and not feeling in a good mental place when it doesn't resolve. And unfortunately, we see a lot of people that have had back pain for a very long period of time, and if that expectation from the outset that it'll go away in a few days, and it doesn't, and then a few days turns into a few weeks and a few months, still under the proviso that it should just go away on its own, then you can really get mentally in a bit of trouble. And fundamentally, that's down to just not evaluating the problem in the context effectively. Then we get on to the practical tips. And a lot of people say, well, I just want the practical tips. I don't want the other stuff. That's the lectures. I don't need them. Yes, you do. Because those lectures are relevant to 15, 16, or maybe even 17 hours of your waking day. These little practices, you're only going to be doing them for 15, 45 minutes, maybe an hour a day. So you can, a lot of people get focused on, they go, oh, the exercises. You're only doing them for an hour a day, if that. You need to consider the other stuff that we've lectured you on in some respects, in this video, because if you don't consider those, the exercises won't work. Even if you're doing the right ones, it's not going to work. Now, what are these exercises? They're exercises to keep the hips mobile. I'm going to talk about principles because that's more applicable for you. To keep these hips mobile, because if the hips are more mobile, the back doesn't get stressed and involved as much in movement. For example, if we're bending down, if our hips are really stiff, our back is going to round very quickly. But if our hips are mobile, more mobile, then our hips can do the movement, so our back doesn't have to in those early stages. That's very, very important. We also want to be able to take pressure off the lumbar spine. That's decompressing, taking load off this section here so it can heal, because it is that failure to deal with the compressive load that has caused the injury in the first place and contributed to that injury, and it's unloading periodically on a daily basis, a couple of times a day. That is really tremendously helpful, and we talk a lot about the towel exercise to do that. It's not just lying down, it's putting the spine in a nice, good, normal position. For example, and I know there are some pitfalls in this example that I'm going to use now, but if I've sprained my wrist, I don't hold it like that all day. We try and hold it in its neutral, most ideal position. That's a rough argument, but the same thing with the lumbar spine. We want to try and put it in its best possible position so it can heal in its best possible position on a regular basis, knowing full well that most of your day it's not going to be in that ideal position. In spite of our best efforts, we'll get close to it, but not all the time. So that ideal little scenario, periodically through the day, to put it in the right position is without a doubt a helpful thing to do. And then finally, we want to learn to control the core again. A lot of you guys, we're inactive, we're not doing things on a daily basis. Maybe we've got a desk job, maybe we're at home, maybe we're sat down for a large portion of the day, driving to and from here and there, and we don't have good control over our core. So we need to learn that fundamental. And those things will help you to start. Now, let's get on to the last point, number 4. The final point is about strengthening. We have to rebuild this structure, rebuild the supporting structures. Remember your muscles, well, don't remember because I haven't told you yet, but I'm going to tell you now. Remember, these muscles are going to change a lot faster than the structures in and around the disc. They tend to be very slow changing structures, which is why back pain creeps on for such a long period of time. Why you can sometimes strain yourself today and not feel it till tomorrow morning. All of a sudden you're like, wow, my back's really bad and I don't know what I did. It was only minor yesterday, because these tissues respond slowly, unlike the muscles. So we leverage the quick adaptation of the muscles, relatively speaking. They don't change overnight. And we strengthen those muscles so they can provide extra added support as quickly as possible for that lumbar spine as it's going through its healing remodeling process. We want to do safe, sensible exercises to start with that doesn't involve too much load. Maybe it's on the floor in a safe environment, and exercises that start to mimic the activities we have to do on a daily basis. That's very, very important. And then we want to move on and start to add load to the spine, start to stimulate those collagen fibers that are trying to knit back together, put some load and movement through that section of the spine so it can start to understand, okay, that's how I need to build. I've got this pressure coming on me on a daily basis. I need to put some extra collagen down here. I need to tidy this up and orientate myself along these stress lines so I build back a strong, healthy segment. That is important, and that is the role of loading. And then continually adding in and strengthening those muscles further. So fundamentally, we're actually stronger than we were before the injury took place. Because remember, in a lot of cases, and I've said it a number of times in this video, it's built up over a long period of time. And during that long period of time, we probably aren't as strong and as well conditioned as we should be. And therefore, if we can use this as just a wake-up call to do the right things, get those discs to start healing again effectively, because your body is trying to heal every single day anyway, but give it the support it needs. Start to strengthen, take on board some healthy movement practices, learn to move correctly, start to strengthen up with additional resistance or load-bearing exercises, and you will do remarkably well. Yes, it may take some time, and if we've evaluated the proper context of the problem and how long it's been building up for, then we will be able to move forwards and we'll be more mentally comfortable with the fact that this will take a bit of time, but we're on the journey, and all you got to do is put one step in front of the other and you will be further. And then you'll look back and go, wow, I've come an awful long way and I'm much better than I was before, and I can continue to do more. And more importantly, because disc sometimes happens or frequently happens, you are in control of the recovery process. It is not imposing its will on you. You have the ability to take control of these things and really take control of your recovery process and get back to doing things you love. Hopefully you found this video really helpful, and hopefully you managed to stick with it through those early lectures and get onto the latter part of the video where you really helped get an understanding of what you need to do to fix these disc injuries. Whether it's a herniated disc and an extreme variation, or whether it's a degenerative disc and it's been there for a long time and it's niggly, there is a lot you can do, and it starts with a reflective process and then it starts to continue on with action. If you did find it helpful, give us a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel so you stay up to date with all the videos that we put out to help you on your journey to getting back in shape. See you in the next one. If you have stayed around till the end of this video, thanks for watching. I really do hope you got value in it. If you want more support and more guidance with this sort of thing, there'll be a card up here or a link in the description where you can learn more about the full Back in Shape program, which is exactly what you need to take you through this recovery process. So you don't need to do the extra research, you can just follow the instructions. You can read more about the reviews from the hundreds of other members, maybe even more by the time you're watching this video, who've been through and are going through the program and getting the results they need with the various conditions that they have. Yes, it's disc injuries, but there's also plenty of others of varying degrees and maybe different conditions combined as well in there that are getting results. And the important thing is that you're part of that community and you've got that support and the program, the what are you doing, the plan of action going forward. So do check it out. Link up here. We'll see you soon.